The Mil Mi-24 is a large helicopter gunship and attack helicopter and low-capacity troop transport with room for 8 passengers. It is produced by Mil Moscow Helicopter Plant and operated since 1972 by the Soviet Air Force, its successors, and more than 30 other nations. In NATO circles, the export versions, Mi-25 and Mi-35, are denoted with a letter suffix as Hind D and Hind E respectively. Soviet pilots called the Mi-24 the flying tank, or THTH micron nth degree NN per mil THTH to the first nth degree TH 1/2 TH. More common unofficial nicknames were Crocodile due to the helicopter's camouflage scheme and Drinking Glass, because of the flat glass plates which surround the cockpit of the Mi-24. Development. During the early 1960s, it became apparent to Soviet designer Mikhail Leontievich Mil that the trend towards ever-increasing battlefield mobility would result in the creation of flying infantry fighting vehicles, which could be used to perform both fire support and infantry transport missions. The first expression of this concept was a mock-up unveiled in 1966 in the experimental shop of the Ministry of Aircraft's Factory No. 329 where Mil was head designer. The mock-up designated V-24 was based on another project, the V-22 utility helicopter, which itself never flew. The V-24 had a central infantry compartment that could hold 8 troops sitting back-to-back, and a set of small wings positioned to the top rear of the passenger cabin, capable of holding up to 6 missiles or rockets and a twin-barreled GSH-23L cannon fixed to the landing skid. Mil proposed the design to the heads of the Soviet armed forces, and while he had the support of a number of strategists, he was opposed by several more senior members of the armed forces who believed that conventional weapons were a better use of resources. Despite the opposition, Mil managed to persuade the defense minister's first deputy, Marshal Andrei A. Grichko, to convene an expert panel to look into the matter. While the panel's opinions were mixed, supporters of the project eventually held sway and a request for design proposals for a battlefield support helicopter was issued. The development of gunships and attack helicopters by the U.S. Army during the Vietnam War convinced the Soviets of the advantages of armed helicopter ground support doctrine, which had a positive influence on moving forward with the development of the Mi-24. Mil engineers prepared 2 basic designs, a 7-ton single-engine design and a 10.5-ton twin-engine design, both based on the 1,700 HP Azotov TV3-177A turboshaft. Later, 3 complete mock-ups were produced, along with 5 cockpit mock-ups to allow the pilot and weapons station operator positions to be fine-tuned. The Camouflage Design Bureau suggested an Army version of their Ka-25 Horman ASW helicopter as a low-cost option. This was considered but later dropped in favor of the new Mil twin-engine design. A number of changes were made at the insistence of the military, including the replacement of the 23 cannon with a rapid-fire heavy machine gun mounted in a chain turret, and the use of the 9K 114-inch term anti-tank missile. A directive was issued on May 6, 1968 to proceed with development of the twin-engine design. Work proceeded under Mil until his death in 1970. Detailed design work began in August 1968 under the code name Yellow 24. A full-scale mock-up of the design was reviewed and approved in February 1969. Flight tests with a prototype began on September 15, 1969 with a tethered hover, and 4 days later the first free flight was conducted. A second prototype was built, followed by a test batch of 10 helicopters. Acceptance testing for the design began in June 1970, continuing for 18 months. Changes made in the design addressed structural strength, fatigue problems and reduced vibration levels. Also, a 12-degree anhedral was introduced to the wings to address the aircraft's tendency to Dutch roll at speeds in excess of 200 km/h, and the Phalange missile pylons were moved from the fuselage to the wingtips. The tail rotor was moved from the right to the left side of the tail, and the rotation direction reversed. The tail rotor now rotated up on the side towards the front of the aircraft, into the downwash of the rotor, which increased the efficiency of the tail rotor. A number of other design changes were made until the production version Mi-24A entered production in 1970, obtaining its initial operating capability in 1971 and was officially accepted into the state arsenal in 1972. In 1972, following completion of the Mi-24, development began on a unique attack helicopter with transport capability. The new design had a reduced transport capability and was called the Mi-28, and that of the Ka-50 attack helicopter, which is smaller and more maneuverable and does not have the large cabin for carrying troops. In October 2007, the Russian Air Force announced it would replace its Mi-24 fleet with Mi-28 nanoseconds and Ka-52s by 2015. However, due to economics, the Russian Air Force will upgrade some Mi-24s and keep them in service past 2015, as will the Russian Navy. Design overview. The core of the aircraft was derived from the Mil Mi-8 with two top-mounted turboshaft engines driving a mid-mounted 17.3 M5 blade main rotor and a 3-blade tail rotor. The engine configuration gave the aircraft its distinctive double air intake. Original versions have an angular greenhouse-style cockpit. Model D and later have a characteristic tandem cockpit with a double bubble canopy. Other airframe components came from the Mi-14 Haze. Two mid-mounted stubwings provide weapon hardpoints, each offering 3 stations, in addition to providing lift. The loadout mix is mission-dependent. Mi-24s can be tasked with close air support, anti-tank operations, or aerial combat. The Mi-24 fuselage body is heavily armored and can resist impacts from 12.7-ounce rounds from all angles. The titanium rotor blades are also resistant to 12.7-ounce rounds. The cockpit is protected by ballistic-resistant wind screens and a titanium armored tub. The cockpit and crew compartment are overpressurized to protect the crew in NBC conditions. Flight characteristics. Considerable attention was given to making the Mi-24 fast. The airframe was streamlined, and fitted with retractable tricycle undercarriage landing gear to reduce drag. The wings provide considerable lift at high speed, up to a quarter of total lift. These caused a problem when trying to perform tight turns in Afghanistan, resulting in them flying in pairs where possible. The main rotor was tilted 2.5 degrees to the right from the fuselage to compensate for translating tendency at a hover. The landing gear was also tilted to the left so the rotor would still be level when the aircraft was on the ground, making the rest of the airframe tilt to the left. The tail was also asymmetrical to give a side force at speed, thus unloading the tail rotor. A modified Mi-24B, named A-10, was used in several speed and time to climb world record attempts. The helicopter had been modified to reduce weight as much as possible, and among the measures used was to remove the stub wings. The speed record over a closed 1,000 km course set on August 13, 1975 of 332.65 km/h still stands, as do many of the female-specific records set by the all-female crew of Galina Rastoyeva and Lyudmila Polyanskaya. On September 21, 1978 the A-10 set the absolute speed record for helicopters with 368.4 km/h over a 15/25 km course. The record stood until 1986 when it was broken by the current record holder, a modified Westland Lynx. Comparison to Western helicopters. As a combination of armored gunship and troop transport, the Mi-24 has no direct NATO counterpart. While the UH-1 helicopters were used in the Vietnam War either to ferry troops, or as gunships, they were not able to do both at the same time. Converting a UH-1 into a gunship meant stripping the entire passenger area to accommodate extra fuel and ammunition, and removing its troop transport capability, while it has no armor. The Mi-24 was designed to do both, and this was greatly exploited by airborne units of the Soviet Army during the 1980–89 Soviet War in Afghanistan. The closest Western equivalent was the Sikorsky S-67 Black Hawk, which used many of the same design principles and was also built as a high-speed, high-agility attack helicopter with limited troop transport capability using many components from the existing Sikorsky S-61. The S-67, however, was never adopted for service. Other Western equivalents are the IAR-330 of the Romanian Army, which is a license-built armed version of the or copyright Rospartiel SA-330 Puma and MH-60 direct action penetrator, a special-purpose armed variant of the Sikorsky UH-60 Black Hawk. The Hind has been called the world's only assault helicopter, for its combination of firepower and troop-carrying capability. Operational history: Ogaden War. The first use of the Mi-24 in combat was with the Ethiopian forces during the Ogaden War against Somalia. The helicopters formed part of a massive airlift of military equipment from the Soviet Union, after the Soviets switched sides towards the end of 1977. The helicopters were instrumental in the combined air and ground assault that allowed the Ethiopians to retake the Ogaden, by the beginning of 1978. Cambodian-Vietnamese War. The Mi-24A was extensively used by the Vietnam People's Air Force in the Cambodian-Euro-Vietnamese War against the Khmer Rouge. The gunships destroyed many of their bases and outposts up until 1986, when KR forces were driven to the border of Thailand. Chadian-Libyan conflict. The Libyan Air Force actively used Mi-24A and Mi-25 units during their numerous interventions in Chad's civil war. The Mi-24s were first used in October 1980 in the Battle of N'Djamena, where they helped the People's Armed Forces seize the capital. In March 1987, the Armed Forces of the North, which were backed by the USA and France, managed to seize a Libyan Air Force base at Aradi Doum in northern Chad. Among the aircraft captured during this raid were 3 Mi-25s. These were turned over to France, which in turn sent one to the United Kingdom and one to the USA. Soviet war in Afghanistan. The aircraft was operated extensively during the Soviet war in Afghanistan, mainly for bombing Mujahideen fighters. When the U.S. supplied heat-seeking Stinger missiles to the Mujahideen, the Soviet Mi-8 and Mi-24 helicopters proved to be favorite targets of the rebels. It is difficult to find the total number of Mi-24s used in Afghanistan. At the end of 1990, the whole Soviet army had 1,420 Mi-24s. During the Afghan war, the sources estimate the strength of the helicopters up to 600 machines per year, with up to 250 maybe Mi-24s. Other sources like the CIA's secret report from 1987 counts data per year, starting from 85 Mi-24 in 1980 to 120 in 1985, showing increasing use of these helicopters. First deployment and combat. Mi-24s were supplied to the Afghan government in April 1979 to deal with Mujahideen guerrillas. The Afghan pilots were well trained and made effective use of their machines, but the Mujahideen were not easy targets. The first Mi-24 to be lost in action was shot down by guerrillas on July 18, 1979. The situation in Afghanistan grew worse, and on December 25, 1979, Soviet troops were committed to the war. After a brutal learning curve in the face of Afghan rebels, Mi-24 pilots learned to be dangerous themselves, and the rebels called the Mi-24 Shaitanaba. In one case, a Mi-24 pilot who was out of ammunition managed to rescue a company of infantry by maneuvering aggressively towards Mujahideen guerrillas and scaring them off. The Mi-24 was popular with ground troops, since it could stay on the battlefield and provide fire as needed, while fast-mover strike jets could only stay for a short time before heading back to base to refuel. The Mi-24's favored munition was the 80mm S-8 rocket, the 57 OMS-5 having proven too light to be effective. The 23 gun pod was also popular. Extra rounds of rocket ammunition were often carried internally so that the crew could land and self-reload in the field. The Mi-24 could carry 10 100-kilogram iron bombs for attacks on camps or strong points, while harder targets could be dealt with a load of 4 250-kilogram or 2 500-kilogram iron bombs. Some Mi-24 crews became experts at dropping bombs precisely on targets. Fuel-air explosive bombs were also used in a few instances, though crews initially underestimated the sheer blast force of such weapons and were caught by shock waves. Combat experience quickly demonstrated the disadvantages of having a Mi-24 carrying troops. Gunship crews found the soldiers a concern and a distraction while being shot at, and preferred to fly lightly loaded anyway, especially given their operations from high ground altitudes in Afghanistan. Mi-24 troop compartment armor was often removed to reduce weight. Troops would be carried in Mi-8 helicopters while the Mi-24s provided fire support. It did prove useful to carry a technician in the Mi-24's crew compartment, handling a light machine gun in a window port. This gave the Mi-24 some ability to watch its back while leaving a target area. In some cases a light machine gun was fitted on both sides to allow the technician to move from one side to the other without having to take the machine gun with him. This weapon configuration still left the gunship line to the direct rear, and Mil experimented with fitting a machine gun in the back of the fuselage, accessible to the gunner through a narrow crawlway. The experiment was highly unsuccessful, as the space was cramped, full of engine exhaust fumes, and otherwise unbearable. During a demonstration, an overweight Soviet Air Force general got stuck in the crawlway. Operational Mi-24s were retrofitted with rear-view mirrors to help the pilot spot threats and take evasive action. The Mi-24s not only protected helicopter troop assaults and supported ground actions. They also protected convoys, using rockets with flechette warheads to drive off ambushes, perform strikes on pre-designated targets, and engaged in hunter-killer sweeps. The hunter-killer Mi-24s operated in pairs at minimum, more often groups of 4 or 8, to provide mutual fire support. The Mujahideen learned to move mostly at night to avoid the gunships, and in response the Soviets trained their Mi-24 crews in night fighting, dropping parachute flares to illuminate potential targets for attack. The Mujahideen quickly caught on and scattered as quickly as possible when Soviet target designation flares were lit nearby. Attrition in Afghanistan. The war in Afghanistan brought with it losses by attrition. The environment itself, dusty and often hot, was rough on the machines. Dusty conditions led to the development of the PZU air intake filters. The rebels' primary air defense weapons early in the war were heavy machine guns and anti-aircraft cannons, though anything smaller than a 23 mm shell generally did not do much damage to a Mi-24. The cockpit glass panels were resistant to 12.7 ounce rounds. The rebels also used Soviet-made shoulder-launched, heat-seeking surface-to-air missiles and American Red-Eye shoulder-launched SAMs, which had either been captured from the Soviets or their Afghan allies or were supplied from Western sources. Many of them came from stocks the Israelis had captured during their wars with Soviet-backed states in the Middle East. Owing to a combination of the limited capabilities of these early types of missiles, poor training and poor material condition of the missiles, they were not particularly effective. The RPG-7, originally developed as an anti-tank weapon, was the first effective countermeasure to the Hind. However, the RPG-7, not being designed for air defense, had several shortcomings owing to its design. Oftentimes attempting to use one to shoot down a helicopter could lead to the user injuring themselves with the rocket's backblast. From 1986 the CIA then began supplying the Afghan rebels with newer Stinger shoulder-launched, heat-seeking SAMs. These were a marked improvement over earlier weapons, and while their actual military impact was not irrelevant, their real value was their demoralization and deterrent value against air power, and their propaganda worth to anti-Soviet groups. The Stinger missile locked onto infrared emissions from the aircraft, particularly engine exhaust, and was resistant to interference from decoy flares. Countermeasure flares and missile warning systems were later installed in all Soviet Mil Mi-2, Mi-8, and Mi-24 helicopters, giving pilots a chance to evade the missile. Heat dissipators were also fitted to exhausts to decrease the Mi-24's heat signature. Tactical and doctrinal changes were introduced to make it harder for the enemy to deploy these weapons effectively. These reduced the Stinger threat but did not eliminate it. Mi-24s were also used to shield jet transports flying in and out of Kabul from Stingers. The gunships carried flares to blind the heat-seeking missiles. The crews called themselves mandatory matrosovs, after a Soviet hero of the Second World War who threw himself across a German machine gun to let his comrades break through. According to Russian sources, 74 helicopters were lost, including 27 shot down by Stinger and 2 by Red Eye. In many cases, however, the helicopters, thanks to their armor and the durability of construction, withstood significant damage. Mi-24 crews and end of Soviet involvement. Mi-24 crews carried AK-74 and other handheld weapons to give them a better chance of survival if forced down. Early in the war, head of Mil Marat Tishenko visited Afghanistan to see what the troops thought of his helicopters, and gunship crews put on several displays for him. They even demonstrated maneuvers, such as barrel rolls, which design engineers considered impossible. An astounded Dr. Tishenko commented, "I thought I knew what my helicopters could do, now I'm not so sure." The last Soviet Mi-24 was shot down during the night of February 2, 1989, with both crewmen killed. It was also the last Soviet helicopter lost during nearly 10 years of warfare. Mi-24s in Afghanistan after Soviet withdrawal. Mi-24s passed on to Soviet-backed Afghan forces during the war remained in dwindling service in the grinding civil war that continued after the Soviet withdrawal. Some were flown by defectors to neighboring Pakistan, and a few of these machines apparently found their way into the hands of the U.S. Army. Afghan Air Force Mi-24s in the hands of the ascendant Taliban gradually became inoperable, but a few flown by the Northern Alliance, which had Russian assistance and access to spares, remained operational up to the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan in the fall of 2001. In 2008, the Afghan Air Force took delivery of 6 refurbished Mi-35 helicopters, purchased from the Czech Republic. The Afghan pilots were trained by India and began live-firing exercises in May 2009 in order to escort Mi-17 transport helicopters on operations in restive parts of the country. Iran-Iraq War. The Mi-25 saw considerable use by the Iraqi army during the long war against Iran. Its heavy armament was a key factor in causing severe damage to Iranian ground forces during the war. However, the Mi-25s lacked an effective anti-tank capability, as they were only armed with obsolete 9M17 Scorpion missiles. This led the Iraqis to develop new gunship tactics, with help from East German advisors. The Mi-25s would form hunter-killer teams with French-built or copyright Rospartial Gazelles, with the Mi-25s leading the attack and using their massive firepower to suppress Iranian air defenses, and the Gazelles using their hot missiles to engage armored fighting vehicles. These tactics proved effective in halting Iranian offensives, such as Operation Ramadan in July 1982. This war also saw the only confirmed air-to-air helicopter battles in history, with the Iraqi Mi-25s flying against Iranian AH-1JC Cobras on several separate occasions. Not long after Iraq's initial invasion of Iran, in November 1982, Iranian Sea Cobras crept up on 2 Mi-25s and hit them with tow-wire-guided anti-tank missiles. One Mi-25 went down immediately, the other was badly damaged and crashed before reaching base. The Iranians pulled off a repeat performance on April 24, 1981, destroying 2 Mi-25s without incurring losses to themselves. The Iraqis hit back, claiming the destruction of a Sea Cobra on September 14, 1983, then 3 Sea Cobras on February 5, 1984 and 3 more on February 25, 1984. After a lull in helicopter losses, each side lost a gunship on February 13, 1986. Later, a Mi-25 claimed a Sea Cobra shot down with the RKB gun on February 16, and a Sea Cobra claimed a Mi-25 shot down with rockets on February 18. The last engagement between the two types was on May 22, 1986, when Mi-25s shot down a Sea Cobra. The final claim tally was 10 Sea Cobras destroyed and 6 Mi-25s destroyed. The relatively small numbers and the inevitable disputes over actual kill numbers makes it unclear if one gunship had a real technical superiority over the other. Iraqi Mi-25s also claimed a total of 43 kills against other Iranian helicopters, such as Augusta Bell UH-1 Hueys. In general, the Iraqi pilots liked the Mi-25, in particular for its high speed, long range, high versatility and large weapon load, but disliked the relatively ineffectual weapons and lack of agility. The Mi-25 was also used by Iraq in chemical warfare against Iranians and Kurdish civilians in Halabja. Nicaraguan Civil War. Mi-25s were also used by the Nicaraguan army during the Civil War of the 1980s. Nicaragua received 12 Mi-25s in the mid-1980s to deal with Contra insurgents. The Mi-25s performed ground attacks on the Contras and were also fast enough to intercept light aircraft being used by the insurgents. The U.S. Reagan administration regarded introduction of the Mi-25s as a major escalation of tensions in Central America. 2 Mi-25s were shot down by stingers fired by the Contras. A third Mi-25 was damaged while pursuing Contras near the Honduran border, when it was intercepted by Honduran F-86 Sabres and A-37 Dragonflies. A fourth was flown by a defecting Sandinista pilot to Honduras in December 1988. Sri Lankan Civil War. The Indian peacekeeping force in Sri Lanka used Mi-24s when an Indian Air Force detachment was deployed there in support of the Indian and Sri Lankan armed forces in their fight against various Tamil militant groups such as the LTTE. It is believed that Indian losses were considerably reduced by the heavy fire support provided by their Mi-24 gunships. The Indians lost no Mi-24s in the operation, as the Tigers had no weapons capable of dealing with the Crocodile at the time, although several sustained heavy damage from machine gun fire. Since November 14, 1995, the Mi-24 has been used by the Sri Lanka Air Force in the war against the LTTE and has proved highly effective providing close air support for ground forces. The Sri Lanka Air Force currently operates a mix of Mi-24/-35P and Mi-24V/-35 versions attached to its No. 9 attack helicopter squadron. They have recently been upgraded with modern Israeli FLIR and electronic warfare systems. 5 were upgraded to intercept aircraft by adding radar, fully functional helmet-mounted target tracking systems, and AAMs. More than 5 Mi-24s have been lost to LTTE manpads, and another 2 lost in attacks on air bases, with 1 heavily damaged but later returned to service. Persian Gulf War. The Mi-24 was also heavily employed by the Iraqi army during their invasion of Kuwait, although most were withdrawn by Saddam Hussein when it became apparent they would be needed to help retain his grip on power in the aftermath of the war. In the ensuing 1991 uprisings in Iraq, these helicopters were used against dissidents as well as fleeing civilian refugees. A few Mi-24s were later sent over the border into Iran, along with many other Iraqi military aircraft, in the hope of sparing them from destruction by Allied airstrikes. Some Mi-24 were captured and later sent to the U.S. and operated by OPTECOTSA in Fort Bliss and Fort Irwin. Sierra Leone Civil War. 3 Mi-24 versus owned by Sierra Leone and flown by South African military contractors, including Neil Ellis, were used against AUF rebels. In 1995, they helped drive the AUF from the capital, Freetown. Guinea also used its Mi-24s against the AUF on both sides of the border and was alleged to have provided air support to the LUAD insurgency in northern Liberia in 2001-03. Croatian War of Independence. 12 Mi-24s were delivered to Croatia in 1993, and were effectively used in 1995 by the Croatian army in Operation Storm against Krajina army paramilitaries. The Mi-24 was used to strike deep into the enemy background and disrupt Krajina army communications. The actions of the Mi-24s were successful and one Croatian Mi-24 crashed near the city of Drvar, Bosnia and Herzegovina due to strong winds. Both the pilot and the operator survived. The Mi-24s used by Croatia were obtained from Ukraine. The helicopters were withdrawn from service in 2004. One Mi-24 was modified to carry Mark 46 torpedoes. First and Second Wars in Chechnya. During the First and Second Chechen Wars, beginning in 1994 and 1999 respectively, Mi-24s were employed by the Russian armed forces. In the first year of the Second Chechen War, 11 Mi-24s were lost by Russian forces, about half of which were lost as a result of enemy action. Peruvian operations. The Peruvian Air Force received 12 Mi-25DS from the USSR in 1983-85 after ordering them in the aftermath of 1981 Pacuacha conflict with Ecuador. These have been permanently based at the Vita Air Base near La Jolla ever since, operated by the 4th Air Group of the 211th Air Squadron. Their first deployment occurred in June 1989 during the war against communist guerrillas in the Peruvian highlands, which continues in the valley of rivers Apurimac, Ain and Mantaro, although in limited numbers at the present. Peru employed Mi-25s against Ecuadorian forces during the short Senapur conflict in early 1995. The only loss occurred on February 7, when an FAP Mi-25 was downed after being hit in quick succession by at least two probably three K-38 English shoulder-fired missiles during a low-altitude mission over the Senapur Valley. The 3 crewmen were killed. Sudanese Civil War. In 1995, the Sudanese Air Force acquired 6 Mi-24s for use in southern Sudan and the Nuba Mountains to engage the SPLA. At least 2 aircraft were lost in non-combat situations within the first year of operation. A further 12 were bought in 2001, and used extensively in the oil fields of southern Sudan. Mi-24s were also deployed to Darfur in 2004. 5. First and Second Congo Wars, 3 Mi-24s were used by Mobutu's army and were later acquired by the new Air Force of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. These were supplied to Zaire in 1997 as part of a French-Serbian contract. At least one was flown by Serbian mercenaries. One hit a power line and crashed on March 27, 1997, killing the 3 crew and 4 passengers. Zimbabwean Mi-24s were also operated in coordination with the Congolese army. The United Nations peacekeeping mission employed Indian Air Force Mi-24/-35 helicopters to provide support during the Second Congo War. The IAF has been operating in the region since 2003. Kosovo War. 2 Mi-24 verses were used by the Yugoslav Special Operations Unit against Albanian insurgents of the Kosovo Liberation Army, during the Kosovo War. Conflict in Republic of Macedonia. The military of the Republic of Macedonia acquired used Ukrainian Mi-24 verses. They were used frequently against Albanian insurgents during the 2001 conflict in Macedonia. The main areas of action were in Tetovo, Raduša and Arachinovo. Ivorian Civil War. During the Ivorian Civil War 5 Mi-24s piloted by mercenaries were used in support of government forces. They were later destroyed by the French army in retaliation for an air attack on a French base which killed 9 soldiers. Afghanistan War. In 2008 and 2009, the Czech Republic donated 6 Mi-24s under the ANA Equipment Donation Program. As a result, the Afghan National Army Air Corps now has the ability to escort its own helicopters with heavily armed attack helicopters. Currently 9 Mi-35 attack helicopters are operated by the ANAAC. Major Caleb M. Nimmo was the first American to fly the Mi-35 Hind in combat. On September 13, 2011, a Mi-35 attack chopper of the Afghan National Army was used to hold back an attack on ISAF and police buildings. Polish helicopter detachment contributed with Mi-24s to International Security Assistance Force. The Polish pilots trained in Germany before deploying to Afghanistan and currently train with U.S. service personnel. On January 26, 2011, one Mi-24 caught on fire during takeoff from its base in Azy. 1 American and 4 Polish soldiers were able to evacuate unharmed. This leaves the Polish contingent with 5 operational Mi-24s and 4 Mi-17s. Iraq War. The Polish contingent in Iraq has been using 6 Mi-24DS since December 2004. One of them crashed on July 18, 2006 in an airbase in Al-Diwaniyah. Polish Mi-24DS used in Iraq will not be returning to Poland due to their age, condition, low combat value of the Mi-24D variant, and high shipping costs. Depending on their condition they will be transferred to the new Iraqi army or scrapped. New Mi-35 picoseconds will be bought by the Polish army as replacements of equipment depleted during combat operations for the Mi-24DS used and left in Iraq. War in Somalia. The Ethiopian Air Force operates about 3 Mi-35 and 10 Mi-24D helicopter gunships in the Somalian theater. One was shot down near the Mogadishu International Airport on March 30, 2007 by Somali insurgents. War in Chad. Upon returning to Abesh, one of the Chadian Mi-35s made a forced landing at the airport. It was claimed that it was shot down by rebels. South Ossetia War. During the 2008 South Ossetia War, the Mi-24 was used by both Russia and Georgia. Libyan Civil War. The Libyan Air Force Mi-24s were used by both sides to attack enemy positions during the 2011 Libyan Civil War. A number were captured by the rebels, who formed the Free Libyan Air Force together with other captured air assets. During the battle for the Benina Airport, one Mi-35 was destroyed on the ground on February 23, 2011. In the same action, the serial number 854 was captured by the rebels together with a Mi-14. Two Mi-35s operating for the Pro-Gaddafi Libyan Air Force were destroyed on the ground on March 26, 2011 by French aircraft enforcing the no-fly zone. One Free Libyan Air Force Mi-25D violated the no-fly zone on April 9, 2011 to strike loyalist positions in Oudabia. It was shot down by Libyan ground forces during the action. The pilot, Captain Hussein al-Wafali, died in the crash. A number of other Mi-25s were claimed shot down by the rebels. 2010 2011 Ivorian crisis, Ukrainian Army Mi-24P helicopters as part of the United Nations peacekeeping force fired 4 missiles at a pro-Gbagbo military camp in Ivory Coast's main city of Abidjan. Syrian civil war. Forces loyal to Syrian President Bashar Assad have used Mi-24s to attack rebels involved in bombings in many of Syria's most populated cities. Controversy has surrounded an alleged delivery of Mi-25s to the Syrian military, due to NATO members, including Turkey, disallowing such arms shipments through their territory. Syrian insurgents captured at least one damaged or destroyed Mi-25, along with other helicopters, after the fall of Taftanas Air Base in January 2013. Invasion of Mali 2013, French forces intervened in Mali after AQIM had taken over the nation, which operated Mi-24 Hind D variant. 4 of which were imported from Bulgaria. At least 2 were destroyed by retreating AQIM forces. Unknown whether they are now used for spare parts or have been scrapped. Kachin conflict. The Myanmar Air Force uses the Mi-24 in the Kachin conflict against the Kachin Independence Army. Post-U.S. Iraqi insurgency, the new Iraqi Air Force is currently receiving 40 Mi-35 ordered from Russia as part of an arms deal that includes Mi-28 and Ka-52 attack helicopters, as well as Pantsir air defense systems. The delivery of the first 4 was announced by Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki in November 2013. Their first deployment began in late December against camps of the al-Qaeda-linked Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant and several Islamist militants in the Al-Aba province that have taken control of several areas of Fallujah and Ramadi. FLIR footage of the strikes has been released by the military. Crimean Crisis of 2014, Russia deployed 13 Mi-24s during the 2014 Crimean Crisis while deploying troops to Crimea. Pro-Russian unrest in Ukraine. During the siege of Slavyansk, on May 2, 2014, 2 Ukrainian Mi-24s were shot down by pro-Russian insurgents. The Ukraine military claims they were downed by manpads while on patrol close to Slavyansk. The Ukrainian government confirmed both aircraft being shot down along with a Mi-8 damaged by small arms fire. Initial reports reported 2 dead and others wounded. Later 5 crew members were confirmed dead and 1 taken prisoner, before being released on May 5. On May 5, 2014, another Ukrainian Mi-24 was forced to make an emergency landing after being hit by machine gun fire while on patrol close to Slavyansk. The Ukrainian forces recovered the 2 pilots and destroyed the helicopter with a rocket strike by a Su-24 aircraft to prevent its capture by pro-Russian insurgents. Mi-24s supported Su-25's attack aircraft with MiG-29s in top cover during the battle for Donetsk Airport. Variants. Operators: Afghanistan, Afghan Air Force; Algeria, Algerian Air Force; Angola, Defense Force of Angola; Armenia, Armenian Air Force; Azerbaijan, Azerbaijani Air Forces; a Belarus, Belarus Air Force, a Brazil. Brazilian Air Force 2nd a Euro 8th Aviation Group. A Bulgaria, Bulgarian Air Force, a Burundi, Burundi Army Aviation, a Burkina Faso, Burkina Faso Air Force, a Chad, Chadian Air Force, a Congo, Republic of the Congolese Air Force, a Democratic Republic of the Congo, Congolese Democratic Air Force, a Cuba, Cuban Air Force. A Cyprus, Cyprus Air Forces, a Czech Republic, Czech Air Force, a Djibouti, Djibouti Air Force. An Equatorial Guinea, Equatorial Guinean Air Force, an Eritrea, Eritrean Air Force, a Ethiopia, Ethiopian Air Force. A Georgia, Georgian Air Force, a Guinea, Military of Guinea. A Hungary, Hungarian Air Force. A India, Indian Air Force, a Indonesia, Indonesian Army, a Iraq, Iraqi Air Force, a Kazakhstan, Military of Kazakhstan, a Kyrgyzstan, Military of Kyrgyzstan, a Libya, Free Libyan Air Force, a Macedonia, Macedonian Air Force, a Mali, Air Force of Mali, a Mongolia, Mongolian Air Force, a Mozambique, Military of Mozambique, a Burma, Myanmar Air Force, a Namibia, Namibian Air Force, a Niger, Air Force of Niger, a Nigeria, Nigerian Air Force, a North Korea, North Korean Air Force, a Pakistan, Pakistan Air Force, a Peru, Peruvian Air Force. A Poland, Polish Air Force, Polish Land Forces, a Russia, Russian Air Force, a Rwanda, Military of Rwanda, a Senegal, Senegalese Air Force, a Sierra Leone, Sierra Leone Air Wing, a Sri Lanka, Sri Lanka Air Force, a Sudan, Sudanese Air Force, a Syria, Syrian Air Force, a Tajikistan, Military of Tajikistan, a Turkmenistan, Military of Turkmenistan, a Uganda, Ugandan Air Force. A Ukraine, Ukrainian Ground Forces, a United States, United States Army, a Uzbekistan, Military of Uzbekistan, a Venezuela, Army of Venezuela. A Vietnam, Vietnam People's Air Force, a Yemen, Yemen Air Force, a Zimbabwe, Air Force of Zimbabwe, former operators, a Croatia, Croatian Air Force, a Czechoslovakia, Czechoslovakian Air Force, a East Germany, East German Air Force, a Germany, German Army, a Nicaragua, Furica or Copyright Sandinista, a Slovakia, Slovakian Air Force, a Soviet Union, Soviet Air Force. Accidents. On August 12, 2012, two Ugandan Army Mi-24s flying from Entebbe, Uganda across Kenya to Somalia crashed in rugged terrain in Kenya. They were found 2 days later, burned out, with no likely survivors from the 10 Ugandan servicemen on board the two helicopters. Another aircraft from the same flight crashed on Mount Kenya and all 7 Ugandan servicemen aboard were rescued a day later. The aircraft was supporting an African Union force to fight al-Qaeda-linked al-Shabaab insurgents in the ongoing Somali civil war. A MiL-17 transport helicopter, part of the same mission, landed without problems in the eastern Kenyan town of Garissa near the Somali border for a scheduled refueling stop. Aircraft on display. Mi-24 helicopters can be seen in the following museums: Russia, Central Air Force Museum, Munino, Mi-24A, Belgium, Koninklijke Militair Museum, Brussels, Mi-24, Czech Republic, Prague Aviation Museum, KBELY Euro Mi-24D Tactical No. 0220, Germany, Luftwaffe Museum der Bundeswehr, Berlin Euro Mi-24D, Mi-24P, Hungary, Museum of Hungarian Aviation, Szolnok, Iran, Military Museum in Tehran, Latvia, Riga Aviation Museum, Riga Euro Mi-24A Tactical No. 20, Poland, Polish Army Museum, Warsaw Euro Mi-24. D Tactical No. 013, Polish Air Force Museum, Darton Registered Trademark Blina Euro Mi-24D Tactical No. 016, South Africa, South African Air Force Museum, Zwartkops Air Force Base Euro 1 Mi-24A of the Algerian Air Force on display. Slovakia, Military History Museum, Piecyjenenia Euro Mi-24D Tactical No. 0100, Ukraine, Museum of the Great Patriotic War, Kiev Euro Mi-24B, Ukraine State Aviation Museum, Kiev. Mi-24A, Mi-24D, Mi-24P, Mi-24V, United Kingdom, Imperial War Museum, Dewford, Cambridgeshire. Mi-24D No. 96 German Air Force Markings, United States, Southern Museum of Flight, Birmingham, Alabama, Palmer Air and Space Museum, Tucson AZ, Sri Lanka, Ratmalana Air Force Museum, Hind D. Defense Squadron, Specifications. Data from Indian-military.org, General Characteristics, Crew, 2 Pilot, Weapons System Officer and Technician, Capacity, 8 troops or 4 stretchers or 2,400 kilograms cargo on an external sling, length, 17.5 meters, rotor diameter, 17.3 m, wingspan, 6.5 m, height, 6.5 m, disk area, 235 miles squared, empty weight, 8,500 kilograms, max takeoff weight, 12,000 kilograms, power plant, 2 isotope TV3-117 turbines, 1,600 kilowatts each, performance, maximum speed, 335 kilometers per hour, range, 450 kilometers, service ceiling, 4,900 m, armament, internal guns. Flexible 12.7 mm Yakushov Bazov Yakbi Gatling gun on most variants. Maximum of 1,470 rounds of ammunition. Fixed twin-barrel GSH-30K on the Mi-24P 750 rounds of ammunition. Flexible twin-barrel GSH-23L on the Mi-24VP and Mi-24VM. 450 rounds of ammunition. PKB passenger compartment window-mounted machine guns. External stores. Total payload is 1,500 kilograms of external stores. Inner hardpoints can carry at least 500 kg, outer hardpoints can carry up to 250 kg. Wingtip pylons can only carry the 9M17 Phalange or the 9K114 Sturm complex. Bomb load. Bombs within weight range, up to 500 kilograms. MBD multiple ejector racks, KGMU-2V submunition mine dispenser pods. First generation armament. GUV-8700 Gunpod, UB-32S5 rocket launchers, S-24 240mm rocket, 9M17 Phalange. Second generation armament. UPK-23-250 Gunpod carrying the GSH-23L, B-8V-20, a lightweight long-tubed helicopter version of the S-8 rocket launcher, 9K114 Sturm in pairs on the outer and wingtip pylons. Popular culture. The Mi-24 has appeared in several films and has been a common feature in many video games. See also. Related development, Mil Mi-8, Mil Mi-14, Mil Mi-28, Mil Mi-40, aircraft of comparable role, configuration and era, Sikorsky S-67, MH-60L direct action penetrator, references. Hoyle, Craig. World Air Forces Directory. Flight International 182, pages 40-64. ISNA 0015-3710. Further reading, Eden, Paul. The Encyclopedia of Modern Military Aircraft. London, UK, Amber Books, 2004. ISBN A1-904687-84-9. External links, Mil Mi-24, Mi-25, Mi-35 Hind Akbar at Indian Military Database, Manufacturing Plant, check Air Spotters Gallery of Mi-24 miles-24PN Gallery, Mi-24 Service, Tactics and Variants, a rescue mission by Sri Lanka Air Force with Mi-24 miles-24 Hind from Modeler S View, Mi-24D walk-around photos.